That right there is the total amount of money that I spent on my Porsche 944 over the last 5 years. Here in this folder holds every last receipt to everything I've done to my Porsche 944 over the last 5 years. So I'm gonna be opening up this folder and going over everything involved in this car, from maintenance to repairs, registration, mods, insurance, everything that has ever taken money from my wallet that is involved with this car. I'm gonna be going over it. Before we get into this, go ahead and pause the video right now. No, I'm just kidding. You didn't pause the video, but go ahead and pause the video. Comment down below what you think the total amount of money is gonna be in this folder. The closest comment will get pinned at the top, so make sure you go ahead and do it right now. Also, I did ask you guys on Instagram to take a guess on the total cost of the car as well. So here are all the guesses. Now, I do know who won that, but you won't find out to the end of the video. For everyone guessing, you're only guessing the cost of what's in the folder, not of the car itself. But in order for me to get anything added to the folder, I need to buy the car. So the total cost to acquire the car was $5,000. So after I bought the car, I have to go ahead and register it. So the first year registration was $88.75. The second year, however, that's when I decided to add the custom plate. That went up to a whopping $111.45. Then the next year, for some reason, it dropped down to $111, so I saved 45 cents. And then for the next 2 years, it was $116.54. So yes, having a custom plate is more expensive, but for this one, I think it's worth it. Arguably the most important thing on this car is to have it insured, and my insurance cost is probably a little cheaper than you might think. The total cost to insure this car every month is $43.84. I will not be including that in the total cost of this car just because it changes every 6 months. So now that we have the registration, we can start driving it. Or so I thought. When I first bought the car, there was a decent bit wrong with the engine, and I spent about 2 months working on this car before I ever drove it. So right here is the first 2 months of work that I did to the car. First was an order of $27.82 for the camshaft gaskets. Then I spent $18.63 on a Bosch coolant temperature sensor. Then I spent $5.35 on a new rubber O-ring. Not sure for what. Then as I started to get further into the engine, I realized much more was wrong. So right here I have a total of $111.97 on a new fuel filter, but also a cylinder head gasket. Now we have one of the biggest expenses on this car. It's $484.57, and that was to get my head completely redone.
What do you mean by that?
Now I have another $67.04, and that was for some camshaft housing bolts. Now we have another $53.07, and that is for the cylinder head nuts and washers. Now I have another $9.36, and that is for the air oil separator seal. Then I have another $10.60 for another rubber O-ring and seal ring, and I have no idea what they go to. Then I spent $31.71 on some new spark plugs. Then for $2.89, I bought a washer. I genuinely have no idea what this went to, but I bought a singular washer. And then for $9.63, it looks like I bought a new distributor cap key. So to get the car running in tip-top shape, I spent a total of $873.55 right in the first 2 months. Now at this point in time, after the engine has been fixed, I'm now driving the car, enjoying it, and fixing everything else that breaks. And also fixing other things that needed change, just not that urgently. So the next charge is $40.91 for a radiator drain plug, and I only spent that much because I paid for overnight shipping. The next charge was $115 for some new fuel lines for under the hood. Then I spent $19.95 for some new sun visor clips. Then I spent $11.77 for a new headlight motor relay. Then here's a funny one. I spent $12.52 on another radiator drain plug. Turns out the one I had ordered originally was the wrong one, so I wasted over $40. Then I spent $64.68 on a new front sway bar with the bushings already installed. Then I spent $30.16 on some new drop links for the rear sway bar. Then I spent $32.77 on some new bushings for the front sway bar. Then I spent $24.95 for more sway bar bushings. Then I spent $22.85 on some hex bolts. I'm not too sure what these are for. Then I spent $47.08 on the front sway bar mounts. Then I spent $19.26 on a new horn sleeve for my old steering wheel. Then I spent $16 on a battery cover. Then for my dash mat, I spent $60.70. Then I spent $79.90 for 2 rebuilt lifters for under the hood. Then I spent $101.52 for a new distributor cap and rotor. Then I spent another $9.63 for another distributor key, because I'm pretty sure I lost it again. At least I think that's what that is. Then I spent $21.90 on some new wiper blades. And now for a funny one, I spent about $121 on a new fuel pump because I thought my fuel pump had gone out. Turns out it was just the fuel pump relay. Then I spent $6.97 for a fuel pump mount. Then I spent $13.94 for more fuel pump mounts. Then I spent $40.73 on a new fuel pump relay. Then I spent $10.41 on some nuts and washers, and again, I have no idea what those are for. Then I spent $86.24 on a new Blaupunk radio, which I have yet to install. Then I spent $379 for a new front valence, but I have yet to install it. Then I spent $163.54 on some new speakers for the rear. Then I spent $107.79 for some speakers for the front, which by the way is probably the best thing I've done to this car.
I want you to be mine again, baby.
With me spending more attention on all of the suspension, I decided to go ahead and buy some new shocks. So I spent a total of $307.19 on new shocks all around. Here we go again. I spent $29.86 on another rubber mount and rubber O-ring, which I have no idea what it's for. Then I spent $84 on two more rubber bushings. I'm guessing they were more sway bar bushings for some reason. Then I spent $10.28 on some hexagon bolts. I have no idea what those were for. Then I spent $28.24 on a new sway bar bolts because I guess I broke one. Then I spent about another $16 on some washers. Keep buying washers for some reason, not sure where they were going. Then I spent $51.47 on a new control arm. And then for the most hated job I've ever done on this car, I spent a total of $90.10 for some new engine mounts. Then I spent $3.49 on yet another washer. Then I realized that the rear hatch cover for my car was missing, so I spent $234.23 to get one. Then I spent $18.40 for the spacers for that cargo cover. Then I spent $12.84 on, you guessed it, more washers. Then I realized that because I did one control arm, I might as well go ahead and do the other. And then I also did some tie rod ends for $71.94. Then I spent $106.72 on some taillights, but I have yet to install them. Then for the only service I've ever paid anybody to ever do on this car, it was $307.18 for a four-wheel alignment. And then this right here is the speeding ticket I got leaving the place. Then I decided to buy a car cover, so I spent $86.23. That was the worst car cover I've ever owned in my life. Then I bought some fog light bulbs for about $5. This one right here shocked me quite a bit. I had put some LED headlight bulbs in here with new casings and all, and I genuinely thought I spent $50. As it turns out, I spent $124.12 on some new headlights. Then I spent $43.97 for a new taillight seal and a new power window switch. Then for arguably the best thing I've ever done to this car was the Momo steering wheel. That was a total of $254.24. But because I bought the steering wheel, I had to start buying the other pieces for it. So I spent $96.97 for the adapter. I then bought a spacer for the wheel, which was $49.90. Then to tie in the whole steering wheel, I spent $63.60 on the Porsche horn button. I then had to buy yet another fuel pump relay, and that was $17.83. For $9.39, then I bought another bushing for something, but it doesn't say what. Then I decided to completely redo the shifter in there, so it was $110.14 for everything from the shift lever to all the bolts, the washers, everything. Then I spent $161.43 for a new sunroof seal. Then I spent $107.28 for a new wiper motor. If you thought I was done yet, I'm still going. For $108.66, I redid the hatch seal. I got new pins for it as well, and I did new latches for the sunroof. Then for about $90, I bought an oil pan gasket and a new speedometer cable. I have yet to install the oil pan gasket though. Then for $37.41, I went ahead and put some new power steering fluid in. I recharged my AC, and then I also filled it with a quart of oil. Then I spent $247.53 for a new alternator, the belt, and a power steering belt. Then I spent $37.45 for exhaust manifold gaskets and some other seals. Then I spent $42.50 for a couple of seals and hardware for the exhaust. I then spent $27.38 for some high temperature paint so I could redo my exhaust manifold. I then spent $76.05 to do an oil change on the car. Then I spent $21.66 for a new radiator cap. Then I spent $32.88 on some more washers, some plugs, some screws, everything, and more washers. I then spent $2.96 for an applicator pad to polish up the wheels. I then spent $7.53 for some new fuses. I then spent $18.55 for a touch-up paint pen. I then spent $106.48 for some new brake rotors for the front. And with that, I had to buy pads, and then I also did the bearings as well. So that came out to a total of $58.04. I then had to buy seals for the bearings, so I spent $14.51. I lied earlier when I said that the alignment was the only service I did. So I spent $93.10 to have the brake fluid flushed. And no, I did not get a speeding ticket after that one. I then spent $18.85 on a new column switch for the steering wheel, which I have yet to use. I then spent $147.86 for the brake rotors for the rear. Then I spent $78.36 for the brake pads for the rear, as well as some new handbrake shoes. I then spent $18.28 for an oil filter. And then I bought some new crush washers for $8.61. And then I bought my oil for $37.75. I then spent $27.75 on another column switch for the steering wheel because the first one I bought was the wrong one, so I thought I bought the right one this time, but it turns out I bought the same one. I then spent $36.67 for new jack stands because I realized I don't have a whole lot of jack stands, so I went ahead and just bought some new ones. Then I spent $35.27 on the correct column switch piece. I then spent $119.39 for the rear wheel bearings, as well as some wheel locking nuts. Then I spent $180.47 for the strut brace under the hood. Then I spent $114.98 for some new lug nuts, which I have yet to use because my old wheels are getting refinished. I then spent $92.64 for the hood pads, but I also have yet to install them. I then spent $37.21 on a new battery ground cable. And then I spent $56.89 for another control arm. Cheap control arms break pretty easily, and I broke the ball joint on one of them, and also the control arm bushings are just going bad already. Then for the biggest ticket item I've ever done on this car, $764.96, and that is for the timing belt, water pump, oil cooler gasket, and a bunch of other things like the tools to do it. Now for just a few miscellaneous bits that I don't necessarily have receipts for, but have been writing down the prices on this note. I spent $15 on some parts for the rear cargo cover. I spent $106 for the new phone dial wheels that I have. And then I spent $40 for the center caps for those. I then spent $150 on the pieces of rear carpet that I have yet to install back here as well. I then spent $30 for the new throttle body mounting plate up there. And then I also spent $100 to get the stuff powder coated under the hood. And then I spent $594 on some tires. Now there are a bunch of other miscellaneous receipts in here, but I won't go over them because they're really tiny stuff. But the biggest and most notable one is going to be the battery. I spent about $200 on that. So for everything else, I'm just going to go ahead and add it to the total here. I apologize if I missed anything throughout the video, but I do have everything on my laptop fully tracked and calculated, so I have the exact cost of everything that was in that folder. One charge I did forget to mention was I have so far spent $380 on getting my old cookie cutter wheels refinished. With everything that I've ever done to this car, from maintenance to repairs to fixes to mods, even the registration, everything that was in that folder, the total is $9,779.51. Now that does not count the cost of the car itself. That is strictly just the cost of everything surrounding the car. Now who won the Instagram guess? The winner was Spencer Sansuski. I hope I'm saying your name right, but here's your username right here. And let me just say, you had a scarily close guess of $9,726.78. So I don't know if you own the same car and you've done the exact same stuff as me, or if you're tracking every little transaction I make with this car, but really good guess. So that's all the receipts, all the money, everything that this car has taken from my wallet over the last 5 years. I really hope I helped shed some light on how much this car actually costs to own, operate, and work on. Now, before I end this video, I would like to break that number down to see how much was on fixing it, how much was on maintaining it. So for fixing the car or those mandatory things, I'm at $3,908.32. Then for maintenance, I'm at $1,546.14. For maintenance, I'm just counting things like oil changes, tires, things that, you know, are meant to be replaced every so often, even if they're not broken. So between everything that I've done to the car and the price of the car itself, I'm in this car over 15 grand with the cost of insurance, which honestly is not too bad considering how much fun this car is and how much light it brings into my social media and everything else. So if you did enjoy this video, please make sure to leave a like down below. This video did take a ton of planning to do to get everything together, and then also just share it with your friends, and also make sure to subscribe because there's gonna be plenty more videos where this came from on this car and plenty of other cars as well. But that's it for this one. I know it was a lot of numbers and a lot of analog stuff, but I hope you did enjoy. So drive safe. Love you guys.